Ladies and gentlemen, Harry Drew. Going to turn it over to you, sir. I think you're hooked up with the lanyard, and give us a thrill.
I appreciate that. Before you run off, Dave, I have something for you. Here we go. This is on behalf of the Terminal Approach crew. I believe this is in your size. And for all to see, it's the captain.
All right.
Yeah?
Thank you. Let me tell you, when I was, part of my airline duties is sometimes we do remains dispersal, and that's what the name of the company was, Terminal Approach. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy, folks. I'll catch you later.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here to be able to talk to you about something revolutionary. I'm particularly pleased to have met a number of you, and I can tell you there are about 6 that stand out in your membership that were right on hand and very helpful to me, Jerry, and I thank you for that. I'm going to show you, before I begin, I'm going to show you a short, a little blog spot we have going. It's on YouTube and at the website www.KingmanUFOcrashers.com. There is no verbal audio, but there are sound effects. This was basically filmed at Kingman, Arizona. This is where I am from. And it talks about the exaggerators, you'll hear more about them, and the myths and the legends concerning the 1953 Kingman UFO crash. I spent, beginning in 2006, nearly 6 years doing research to try to find out, A, is there or was there ever a Kingman UFO crash? And B, if it was, where on the world would it be? There was a 448 square mile search area, and that wasn't very enticing for me and my little Wrangler. There is definitely in my research disinformation that has been pouring out in various sources about what happened at Kingman. And so this little short video basically was talking about that and giving everyone a little bit prepared for me showing up somewhere when I finally felt comfortable with the idea of meeting you and telling you something about a UFO and another UFO that did in fact have problems at Kingman, Arizona in May of 1953. Thank you. To give you an idea about who I am, I'm a former museum director of history, anthropology, and archaeology. I am a historian, and that is in the traditional and classic sense. And one of the rubs for historians is to be reading some type of history and reading something that's a misquote or a mistake that's been repeated for decades. And it's very hard for us to remove those types of things. And when I began looking at things about Kingman, I was running into a tremendous variation of versions about it happening, or sort of happening, or it happened somewhere else, or it never happened at all. And it was a minefield to have to dig through some of that to get some type of consensus of what was or was not. I almost failed at that because it seems like The subject has been so corrupted that it was almost impenetrable. Let me tell you what happened here just briefly. 60 years ago, come May of next year, supposedly, allegedly, a UFO flying into the Kingman area went down and crashed. And then the descriptions were that it was seen in one place or an opposite place. And I'm here to tell you that it was seen by a number of people. They were seen because the story about the Kingman crashes is about at least two. And those are relevant. And I've already seen some of the blog spots, and they're saying, oh my God, I hope it's not about the 1953 Kingman UFO crash. But I'm here to tell you that history has no time limits, no matter who says differently. Knowing the facts about an unsolved UFO crash does matter, no matter how old it is. Roswell. Did we just quit? There are enormous implications on what I have learned, and you're going to find those out. In 1947, most citizens in the southwest of Arizona, at least, had never even heard about the Roswell crash. There's just no communication, and you're talking about an era where a telephone was more like a luxury and television was impossible. Here is something that happened in 1947 at Kingman, Arizona. There's an individual who said, I have checked newspapers for 100 miles around Kingman in every direction, even Las Vegas, and found nothing. And this goes back to this, two businessmen flying in an aircraft, and if you see it says a saucer, a disc, who knows? Two businessmen and a propeller-driven airplane flying into what is called the Mojave County Airport, which formerly had been the U.S. Army Air Force Base at Kingman, Arizona, until August of 1945, at which time it was closed. It became a vast storage area for surplus vehicles that used to fly in the air or almost flew in the during the war, in World War II, and they were going to sell them off, and it didn't work. And a year later, the property was turned over to Mojave, M-O-H-A-V-E, County, Arizona. These two chaps are flying along. They're coming into the airport, and suddenly they are being buzzed by very hostile UFOs to the point they thought they were going to be rammed and die. This was 5 days after the Roswell crash. And this was not in a local paper. This was not in a Las Vegas paper. In fact, back then, there were only 3 newspapers. So if you check everything for 100 miles, in 1947 and 1953, you have to move your mind back to that period in time. 3 newspapers. Las Vegas doesn't care about Kingman, Arizona today. No offense to the no-tell town. But they had 26,000 people and 11 casinos, and they had maybe Bugs Moran, I don't know. They had other things going on. Whoop. The following day, in the Prescott, not Prescott, but pronounced Prescott, Arizona newspaper of 1947, they go on to talk about, wow, there's all kinds of UFOs in other places. They never mention Roswell. They mention a lot of places in Arizona. And it's interesting, this particular paper on the 8th shows something right here. Tabulators are saying within 2 weeks of Kenneth Arnold seeing 9 UFOs at Mount Rainier, Washington, that over 41 of 48 states had already seen multiple UFO sightings within 14 days of Kenneth Arnold, which I find is rather exceptional. And the World Inventors Congress were having a convention, and they offered $1,000 if someone would bring in a real UFO to the convention. So there was lots of different attitudes, but this also shows something unique. And I'm not speaking for Roswell. I think Donald Schmitt is the man. He's done a lot of good work, and I commend him and respect him greatly. But I do want to say that a spokesman for the Army Air Corps on this day of July 8, 1947, admitted there were UFOs, and the concern was the Air Force would not be in a position to blanket the nation with radar because they lacked the equipment. And it's right here, released right out of Washington, D.C. Jumping ahead, it's like these things happen and there was nothing really written down. There were no witnesses about the May 1953 Kingman crash. And then suddenly, on April 23, 1973, the Middlesex News, the Daily News of Framingham, Sudbury, Massachusetts, runs a story of a young boy, 15 years old, who's doing a UFO research book for youth. And he happens to interview a neighbor at Sudbury. And that neighbor figures a great deal into what happens in regard to Kingman and the UFO story. He mentions the neighbor's name, and it's Arthur Stansel. And the name, this is interesting, the last name is even disputed on how he spelled his name by what I call exaggerators. It is spelled S-T-A-N-S-E-L. You'll see it C-E-L, C-I-L, and before I even drop to the lower part, let me tell you about Arthur Stansel as a person. He was a World War II veteran, wounded 3 times, received the Bronze Star. He became educated, had a degree in physics and engineering and another very technical science area, and worked at some of the most outstanding places regarding science and the things going on with aircraft and rocketry and that type of thing, including in this state, long ago. At 82 in 2006, before I started my research, unfortunately, or I was not aware of him, and he passed away. But right up to the moment he passed on, he had already donated over 2,000 hours of his time in assisting patients in the hospital where he lived. And I talked to the director of volunteer services at the hospital, and he's a beloved person. And he was also considered very, very much to be an honest person, although he has been maligned over time. And this is also a trait that is associated with the Kingman crashes. The messengers are often demonized. I'm a messenger, I'm ready. The witnesses, all kinds of efforts are made to discredit the witnesses. And it brought to mind to me so many other of the early crashes that I'm seeing the same thing with, and it makes me wonder if there isn't a message within this for you and for me as a historian, that if there's some type of deliberacy here. But the Kingman crash was supposed to involve just one thing. Arthur Stansel was mentioned for the first time in a newspaper story in the Middlesex News, and a clipping of that was seen in the newspaper and clipped and was passed on to a NICAP, highly renowned researcher, Raymond Fowler, who I deeply respect and commend for all of the work that he has done. He is still living today. But the language used and the descriptions misused, led to the point that I contacted the media service that now owns what used to be the Middlesex News, and I explained to them what the problem was. And you're saying, whoa, what is this? This is a reel of microfilm. They shipped it to me so that I could look at the story for what it really is, and I can tell you that it's been misquoted nonstop. This is the front page of the April 23rd, 1973 paper. On the left lower section of this article, it says, UFOs watching Earth, Sudbury boy watching them. And this is the young, Jeff Young, 15 years old. He's reputed to have done an interview when he was 12 or 13 with Stansel, which is highly likely. They were neighbors, along with another young man named Paul Chetham, except when this article was written and produced, and it's 4 pages, so it's not a little story. The other youth is not mentioned because the audio tape and notes were the property of Jeff Young for his book. And you'll notice, I don't know if the audience can see this, Young, meaning the boy, who has been working on the book for almost 6 months, not 3 years. And in the lower segment of this is the first public mentioning of Arthur Stansel, who worked 12 years at Wright-Patterson Airfield on projects related there, and then transferred to Frenchman Flat, Nevada, for nuclear test work that was done there. And he was essentially a blast effect analyst for the nuclear explosions that were going on there. Luckily for me, I go to museums and bona fide research libraries and facilities to get information that I cannot get from deceased witnesses. And I will show you witnesses that I have who are since deceased that I do have interviews from. And this particular letter is to the Mojave County historian at Kingman, Arizona, on September 17th, 1978. And it is from Raymond Fowler, the NICAP researcher, sending a copy of his report along, and it's annotated. So it has things written on it to help explain and emphasize to the reader what you had. I interviewed the late Colonel Wendell Stevens. He was a full bird colonel, but he was much lower ranked back at the time of the Kingman UFO crash. He was part of the first response team from the Air Force. The Air Force knew the craft went down, but didn't know why. And they had to fly into the airport because there was no military presence as such in Kingman, Arizona, other than there was a token, a few airmen doing radar experimentation because the Cold War had driven us into a position of trying to protect ourselves. In talking to Wendell, a highly respected man and a friend to me, the lingering questions that I had that I wanted to be able to help me understand exactly what transpired about this, while he was answering questions, he made reference to something rather incidentally. As we talk, we make reference to something, and I listened to what those people that I interview actually are saying to me, every word. And it was about something tangible near the crash, something physical, and enough to reduce my search radius from 448 miles to 20. Very welcome. That was a lot of driving around in desert, over hills. Let's see if I can make this run. Whoop.
Recovered entirely in secret also. Reports of
No audio on the video. Is anybody hearing this?
30 or 40 minutes,
No?
the van stopped, and it's a big truck with laced up canvas back. Stopped and let the sentries with their dogs, they were canine guards, they all had dogs. And they were let out there and assigned to beds in pyramidal tents. There was 4 pyramidal tents there. Captain, I think he was at the time, by the name of Painter, Major Painter, who was controlled the guards, assigned them their shifts. Later, in another recovery, we ran into a Major Painter. And then in still another one, years later, we ran into a Lieutenant Colonel Painter, who was working as a medical administrative officer at that time. So either that name is being used to obscure the recoveries, or they're moving the same man around, and as he matures and gains grades.
All right. You may have missed right at the very front end. He's talking a little bit about what I was just telling you. The other thing, in listening to some of Wendell's presentations over the years, if you listened carefully, he was saying we, counting himself in some of these things. What I have here are a few pages selected out of a 65-page report from the NICAP researcher Raymond Fowler. And this basically is giving the testimony from Arthur Stansel, who was at Frenchman Flat doing the bomb test. By the way, he received a call on the 20th of May. You'll see all kinds of different dates from a doctor who was the director of the program he worked on and was being instructed to report to Indian Springs Air Force Base the following day at 4:30 p.m. to board a plane to Phoenix, and that it was going to be a secret mission. Well, he did that, and there were 25 scientists waiting at Phoenix with the bus, and he went along with 14 other specialists. And they boarded this bus that had the windows taped off, so the windows are blocked out. And I will show you a picture of that bus. And it's a General Motors 3301. But the interesting things are that when they reached the site after approximately 4 hours of driving, and they were in the almost total darkness, there was a quarter moon out, which means the left side of a moon, when you look at it, that is a quarter moon. And I can tell you the temperature of every day and evening during that period of time, because the weather records are detailed and go all the way back to 1901. They parked the bus 50 feet away. The terrain was hard-packed sand, according to how Stansel felt, and he had been working at Frenchman Flat, where the ground is very hard, compacted sand. It was not paved, and part of the explanation also includes from notations that there was no pavement for the road, literally. And I will show you how extensive that really was. There were 2 spotlights, one on each side of the craft, and they were so bright that once you approached the craft, you could not see out into the night darkness anywhere. It was just blacked out. Most people who know anything about this have heard some of this, and you bear with me, please. I need to bring some people who have not been familiar with this up to speed. There were 20 military police basically circumferring what was a flying saucer. The craft did not crash, it landed. And that's one of the biggest misnomers beyond the fact there are 2, not 1. And the craft was described by Stansel as not dented or even scratched. It had a silver, kind of a dull silver color like brushed aluminum. He never said it was aluminum, and that, of course, has been said multiple places. But this team of scientists and specialists each had a designated area that they were to go to the craft. And a military policeman came to the door of the bus with a checklist, and he read off names. The people on the bus exited and were escorted directly to the place they were to inspect. Arthur Stansel's job was to try and determine the rate of fall and the forward speed of the craft upon impact. And he even questioned his own calculations because the craft should have been obliterated. He was estimating at 20 feet per second rate of fall, 100 knots, 115 miles per hour of forward motion. To help you understand rate of fall, 20 feet per second means it wasn't falling at a normal fall speed. Things fall, if you drop something, stay back, this is my wallet, sorry. 32 feet per second. Per second. So if it's 20 feet per second, there's something a little bit odd that the craft was being able to sustain itself somehow. Oh, it really was. He was rating this on the amount of sinking of the craft in the what he thought was hard-packed ground, and it was at an odd tilt. Not severe, but it didn't come straight down on what were basically nubs, a semblance of landing gear. Very interesting. They did all of this in the course of about 1 hour. They left where they were, which was the northeast side of the Hualapai, Hualapai mountain, down low where the desert meets the mountain. And that's where they were. He had no idea. They were driving in the dark with the windows blocked out. And so he based his calculations on the fact that he was at Frenchman Flat, literally. And what he didn't know was because of the location, it interfered with his computations. He was in a drain field because it's a mountain. And it was May. And this year when, I've been to the site many times, only 3 people have been at the site since the Air Force left it. I found it thanks to Wendell Stevens and something that was a landmark. And my consulting engineer who did drone flights for me, and well, just any old consulting engineer. This engineer is the one that developed and created the flight control system for James Cameron and was with him to make the dive into the Mariana Trench a reality. So I had a good engineer who could help me with things that I lack expertise in. That's what you're supposed to do. I'm a historian, I can piece these things together. This is a General Motors Model 3301 bus. This bus was taken from Camp Irwin, which had changed from U.S. infantry as far as its concentration and turned into an armor training facility in 1951. So they just happened to have a number of things that the infantry would not have had, and this particular vehicle was taken to Phoenix, Arizona, to pick up the people. 36-passenger without the seats, which came out of this thing very easily. It weighed 14,000 pounds. It had a 36-seat for 40 passengers. How do you do that? In the very back of the bus, there's no window, and you could put more luggage, or there was a 4-seat jump seat. There's your 40 people. This bus was later transferred and went to Fort Ord, California, and was used for transporting personnel up around 1959 to Fort Roberts. So it has some history. The driver's name was Dennis. And this is what it says in the back of that bus. Notice, do not discuss classified information. Pretty clear. And if you look again at the windows on this bus, down the side, they open, there's very little room to get out of them. And so to escape if something happened, like it drove off the cliff because the brakes failed, you had to push the top of the window and hopefully squeeze out. but it's very clear. Secrecy plays a part in everything I'm about to tell you, because UFOs or highly advanced experimental aircraft belonging to our country are top secret. And you don't leave them laying around on the side of the road somewhere. Somebody will see them. Whoop.
No, I think the Kingman crash in, I think, May of 1953, Arizona, is very important. A number of people have come forward now, one of whom is the chap called Dr. Fritz Werner, who first approached the researcher Raymond Fowler. And I have his sworn affidavit. I also have pages of his credentials, which have been verified. And I also know his real name. And I find his story very convincing. However, I think it's Kevin Randall in his book on UFO crashes says that it can't really be taken too seriously because...
Whoop. This is basically from a reenactment, and it shows you the carbon arc lights and the troops in the area. I seriously doubt the middleman on his knee with a camera was going on unless he had been in uniform, and it doesn't appear that the stage presentation went that way. Here we have the county sheriff at the time, Frank Porter. He's standing at the center of 8 deputies, and he figures in because I haven't told you one of the key things. This craft went down in the afternoon of 18 May, 1953, not the 20th or the reputed over and over the 21st. It went down 18 May. The sheriff, this is Kingman, 1953, 3,500 people. It's Mayberry. The 8 deputies were pulling 24-hour shifts and breaking up into 2 or 4 as needed so they could keep the sheriff's office going. And that was the best they can do. They're standing on the steps of the 1910 Kingman courthouse, and it's still there, and it's still being used. And there are some highly restricted areas in the lower part of that building and have been since the 50s. The sheriff and the underdeputy drove up to where the crash site was at the foot of the Wallapai on the northeast side, because one of the 2 roads going from east to west in Kingman kept having very unusual things going through. They were military. And a little town, the rumor spread very quick, and he went out right the correct road because it was one of the few. And here were military police, and he spent 15 minutes trying to persuade them as the official county sheriff that he had a right to see what was going on, and was finally turned away. Sheriff Porter will figure in multiple times in things to come in his career concerning UFOs. Here is a drawing that was executed by Raymond Fowler, the NICAP researcher, of the UFO as it was described by Arthur Stansel to him. And if you look at the line through this area, this is the sink depth of the craft, and the approximate dimensions given to it by Arthur Stansel were 30 feet in total diameter with a slight elongation of the whole craft. And the portion that you might think of as like an area that could be occupied was 20 feet in diameter, and the whole craft 14 feet approximately thick and seamless, with the exception of along the outer lip like 2 clamshells coming together. And then Stansel made reference to perimeter slots. He had no idea what they were. I don't either. I have no idea. This was a classified device. The sink rate was due to the high porosity of the soil where it was sitting, the angle was caused because its flight stabilization system had been adversely affected by something that I'm going to show you now, or soon.
They took the craft up by a tank retriever. One of the reasons why they had to do that was because they could not tilt it like they wanted to be able to take it across the Boulder Dam, the road that was built at that time. And it was kind of narrow. So what they had to do is haul it like a house.
This was an M25 tank transporter. It was brought from one like, this is not the original. This is one that would have been brought from Camp Irwin, called Fort Irwin today. I've been out there many times. It's a United States Army National Training Center. Excellent command people there. And when I was there, they were switching over from A1 to the M2 Abrams full battle tank, which are impressive. And this particular vehicle, if you remove the trailer, which was used to take the saucer intact out of the area, you call the whole device an M25. If you remove the trailer, this part of the vehicle becomes an M19. And it's is actually meant to pull tanks out of a ditch, a retriever. And so with Army efficiency, they gave names to even the whole unit being a 25 and part of it called a 19, if that were the case. Here we go. This goes back to checking newspapers all over the place to find out what's going on, to see if there was a Kingman crash. I want to tell you something right now. UFO crashes do not have to appear on the front page of a newspaper to have happened. They are top secret. When we have an F-117, the little stealth fighter, go down, and a couple of those went down, when it was clear the Air Force was busy in one place doing a recovery, the Air Force completely denied anything that was going on. And not everything in intelligence is the same as it was in 1953, but that's pretty consistent. The real interesting thing is that this is May 22nd. On May 21st, Arthur Stansel went by bus and arrived at night at a UFO site where a UFO had landed. And what he was not aware of, or no one necessarily until the 22nd, was this little story right here. It's not quite so little. The sports editor for the Prescott Evening Courier and a former Army Air Force pilot who was contracted by the government and was training Air Force pilots at 3 airfields in Arizona were at a place with a man from Prescott, and they saw 8 UFOs. One on one side and one on another side hovering, and 6. And what the airmen described as doing dogfight maneuvers 5 minutes away from where the Kingman UFO saucer was sitting. Now, speculation would make someone wonder why they would be doing what was described as dogfighting maneuvers. They did this for over an hour, and they were witnessed by these people, and that's how it got in the paper the following day of the 22nd of May, 1953. Other rumors and stories. Atomic weapons, the tests that were going on in Nevada, the EMP, electromagnetic pulse, knocked down the UFO at Kingman. And I'm here to tell you that did not happen. Upshot knothole Grable, which was the test firing of the only 280 millimeter nuclear cannon ever used, and used a 15 kiloton, typically close to Hiroshima-sized nuclear device, went off below 600 feet above the ground, 19 May, and it was called Test Grable. Every test had a name, and that's too low to the ground to overcome what's needed to send EMP effect across 2 mountain ranges that are on the way. And I'm going to skip to the next blast, Upshot Knothole Harry, which was a 32 kiloton detonation on May 25th. And they said one of these knocked it down. And I'm telling you that the first craft in Kingman that went down was on the 18th of May, not the 19th. If the EMP effect from a blast tower for a 32 kiloton bomb could have somehow sent EMP effect, it happened on the 25th of May, and the second craft went down 4 days later on the 22nd. We know it, and the old-timers know it in Kingman as the Red Lake crash. It is 19 miles north of 1953 Old Town Kingman. The other craft is 16 miles southeast of Old Town Kingman, but they were on different days than the bomb blast. Here's what brought down the UFO, both of them. 3 overpowered radar systems. And my engineer did some outstanding calculations for me, and I'll explain. Early radar had a range of basically 25 miles. If you wanted 50 miles, you double the power. And because we were hard-pressed to have any kind of reliable long-range radar system in 1953 that was handy, we could use right then, they started boosting the power up to see what they can do. What happened in Kingman is one radar was set up in what is called Radar Hill in Old Town, 1953, 3,500 people. Old Town Kingman. Another one was set up to the east about 15 miles, and the third one was set north on the east side of Red Lake in a triangle. They didn't plan it that way necessarily to make a triangle, but they just happened to do that. This is for people that live there now and for the people that lived there then. This is a UFO flight path. It's like where FAA would say, you will fly your 737 through here, which, by the way, probably an unhardened commercial 737 would have gone down. I believe that if they can cause avionic problems in a modern-day, unprotected, unshielded commercial aircraft, flying into this would be a problem. Local residents in Kingman complain about flights of birds flying into the radar and getting knocked right out of the air. They were being exposed to microwave radiation energy at a very high level. This, you can just catch a little clip here. This is Radar Hill in Kingman, Arizona. Pardon me. All of the structures the military put in back then are still there. What you had were a number of operators running the radar and some technicians busy trying to boost it. And as my consultant said, he has no idea how they kept from just burning everything up. They thought they were running at about 6 times the norm of what they should have been, and geometric mathematical progression takes it up, if they ever achieved this, it would have been 24 times, which is just about melt the bakelite knobs on the oscilloscopes where they're trying to keep some kind of pattern. There was no frequency locks, so the frequencies were flying all over, and in the center of this triad, there's no way of guessing what really transpired, except they switched it on one morning, and along came the first UFO on the 18th of May. It was struggled along for about 8 miles before it made a rather tilted landing. It didn't come right down flat, was not hurt, and Stansel did not know that his calculations were confused by the fact the blinding lights around the saucer and him not knowing where he is. He could not see. He was in a drain field coming right down off the backside of the Wallapai Mountain, which is 8,266 feet high. It's like the Rockies that stand right up at Kingman. And I've done porosity tests there, and I've been there like October of last year and had to stop work because the ground was frozen and covered with snow. And it does snow in Arizona as you get up to higher elevations. The propagation of high energy microwave is what they were using, and was dangerous for the operators, probably dangerous for some people very far away. And if you look here, you see back lobe and you see side lobes. The antennas were not perfected that they were using. They were bringing together and learning and doing things as fast as they could go. And the side leakage, if you were anywhere around there, you're getting bombarded by this. Not a healthy place to be. And this large lobe is, in fact, the main lobe where the radar goes out, makes contact, reflected back, and they get a distance or elevation or however the radar is that they're actually using for this.
One thing that you should know about Kingman during World War II, he was basically under martial law, because with the military being in, they just didn't want a lot of secrets out. So they pretty much wrapped up the town. Something else to know about Kingman. Kingman was a very patriotic town. So if this UFO crash came and happened, Kingman would be very patriotic and not say anything. They would have kept it hush-hush. That's another thing about UFO history, is you have to kind of know your area. Because if there's certain things that you know about what has happened in history, it'll take you to another way of looking at stuff, basically. So what I'm getting at is, Kingman is a very patriotic town, and if somebody from the military said, nothing would have ever been said.
Now, you were saying that Kingman was or behaved like it was under martial law. Was it in fact under martial law?
During World War II? Yeah.
It was.
Because even though there was a sheriff's office and whatnot, because my mom grew up here in Kingman too. So she kind of said, yeah, there was martial law. Because she had older siblings, and they said, well, you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that. So it was just that everything that was on the West Coast was really hush-hush. They had blackout deals, and that's where you had to cover up your lights, so at nighttime it just looked black. So World War II kind of changed certain aspects on how Americans lived.
Yeah.
So it was the start of, you sign this piece of paper and you don't say nothing about it.
Right.
It's a confidentiality. So you still had that mentality even into the early 50s. It wasn't until, late 50s or the 60s when the radicalism started changing how everybody looks at everything.
This is Rob Chilcote, and he is the aviation historian and museum curator of the Kingman Army Air Force Base Museum. He is also a Kingmanite, born there, his parents born there. He is a cousin, like almost everyone at Kingman. The older folks are related, they're cousins. And so it wasn't just that the military is going, shush, keep this quiet, kind of like aggressively saying that. They were all talking to a family. And as late as 2 weeks ago in Kingman at the BLM office, I was reminded of that as one of the professional field people that I can't name, it wouldn't be fair, is also a cousin, and he said, we're still this way. And they don't share with outsiders hardly anything, and what they do, even me, it's limited. And I've been very fortunate because I've been a resident there for a lengthy time. I'm a historian, and you'll probably notice, maybe I'm dragging along here, but we're picky about the facts that we get. We want the best you can possibly hear about the best we can possibly get to try to take you to what really is true. This is the type of radar system in 1955 that replaced that triangle where there were basically portable units with generator systems out in the field and this type of thing. This was the radar they've been waiting for, the first real step away from the old, more unstable equipment. And this is 1955, and 300 airmen were brought into Kingman, Arizona, whose sole purpose was to run that one radar to be able to look as far as they could for some type of Russian plane coming with an atomic bomb. That was the thinking. Here it says in a newspaper article, just to verify to you that I am honest with you. And this is a looking back at Radar Hill and the old U.S. Air Force installation. And for the most part, it's all there right now. But there are other types of communication gear up on the hill, and you're not allowed there for safety reasons because of the power that's emanated that could cause personal and physical damage to you and anything you have with you.
Apparently the military knew, and they had gone out there to investigate, and actually to recall the crew, and they were dressed with, clean suits on and that type of thing, and walked in and came out post-haste. And the reason why, they were sick. Now, and the people that went in there would refuse to go in there again because of the illness that they felt, One of them heaved up, okay. The disc itself, the disc was taken to now what they call Area 51 or S4, up in that side of the range.
What you're seeing in the very center here, this is Kingman, Arizona. These are the Hualapai Mountains right here. On this corner off screen is, well, you're looking actually at the west face, and to the left is north, that is south. The whole thing runs about 32 miles in length and peaks, as I mentioned, 8,266 feet. The Kingman, what I call Hualapai UFO, landed on the other side of this mountain, down low, where the mountain met the desert. I want to touch again on the exaggerators. This is important. This is alarming to me, and I think everyone should take heart in being able to hear someone come who gives a little gentle challenge to some of this. And it's important. This particular article is talking about May 20, the Kingman, Arizona UFO crash. It's 2 days off, or it's 4 days off. The earliest reference of a crash near Kingman has been made to MUFON researcher Richard Hall in 1964. He was told a story by a future Vietnam commander, and the story goes like this. This commander was in the tower at the Army Air Base. It was nighttime, and on the PPI, the scope that does the turning you see in movies to show blips in the old films, he saw the UFO, and he looked out the window, whichever way he thought he was looking, and there was a brilliant flash of light, and the UFO crashed. And for a real researcher, the first thing you have to deal with the fact is that the Kingman Army Air Force Base closed in 1945. The tower went out of use before August, and all of the equipment out of the tower was removed, including the PPI radars, and they were, in typical military fashion, they were destroyed. So this is telling you a story about that there was a future Vietnam veteran up in the tower watching a UFO at nighttime when it crashed, or well, went down in the day, but 8 years after the tower was no longer even available. It belonged to Mojave County, it was an airport. In other words, it was impossible based on that. The other thing that's interesting is the Richard Hall, who was a very respected, the late Richard Hall, very respected researcher in UFO-related matters, and him being quoted about anything, it always grabs my attention, and talking about that he knew all about this in 1964, and Raymond Fowler had done the interview, and he published this in UFO Magazine in 1976, and then he did a book in 1981, Raymond Fowler, NICAP researcher. Wonderful, wonderful job he did in regard to verification of Arthur Stansel's credibility, his background, and nobody really listened much. But in Richard Hall's book, 1988, 7 years after Raymond Fowler's, Hall commends and touts Fowler's discovery of Arthur Stansel and the entire story. That doesn't sound a lot like he knew about it 9 years before. Typical. I'm going to skip a bunch of things to save you from having to hear all of this. Down here at the bottom, when the military arrived at their destination, or the bus rather, arrived at their destination somewhere southeast of Kingman, that is correct, in one of the washes of the Hualapai Mountains. This is what I have told you. Not the desert out on the flat. But the problem is, this is one of the things where two crashes start merging. And it says, in the washes, that's the red light crash. And I'm going to cover that for you so you have an idea. Another one out of a popular book, and it says, it's talking about 1971, there was an interview. It's you've got to get ahead of Ray Fowler to maybe perhaps minimize the importance of Raymond Fowler and ICAP researchers' investigation by saying an earlier date. Well, they did it that date, you know, so he was just second, and he kind of is important, but he doesn't rate quite the same way. He does. And he talks about a Jeff Young and a Paul Chetham. I showed you earlier a photograph of a 15-year-old boy in a newspaper, Jeff Young. There is not one single word in that Middlesex News article about a Paul Chetham on anything, and Young even goes on to say, and it's in like page 2 of the 4 pages, that he began the project almost 6 months ago. So that kind of has a problem there. But he did have an audio tape, and he did have some notes, and he provided those to Arthur Stansel. But some of the other things that trouble me is that this refers to 2 men. In 71, they would have been 11, 12, or 12 or 13 years old. People that read about this that don't know anything about the Kingman UFO crash start accepting this stuff as it's the gospel. It is not. And I just proved it by showing you the Middlesex newspaper. They proved it to me by sending me the reel of microfilm right from back east so that I could work with the real source rather than this kind of stuff. And then it goes on to say that this boy, these 2 boys, were actually the first people within the UFO research community. They were just going to school, and one of them was writing a book on UFOs for youth. Then there are the claims it was an aluminum-like craft and that it was shot down by rockets or it exploded. And then goes down below and it talks about aliens, and it says, these witnesses claim to have seen 3 small bodies packed in dry ice at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base from the 1953 Kingman crash. And quoting Richard Hall's book, Uninvited Guests, page 78, the book states, there were 4 bodies from Arizona, not saying Kingman, and there were 3 in 1973 taken to Wright-Patterson in dry ice. So there's a little bit of manipulation with facts. It does make a difference. This is currently on a website, okay? I'm going to be kind, I'm not going to mention it, but I will mention the source, but I will mention what the problem is here. This is right now. You can go online and see this with one of the big UFO sites. And this man says, I am a professional private investigator. I have also spoken to a second-hand witness who heard the story from some other people, maybe 2 or 3, or who knows, which makes it third-hand right off the bat. But for me, what kills this story instantly is he talks about military security was set up along Highway 40 from Kingman to Barstow, and they were doing stuff by Boulder City and Searchlight. That's not Boulder, Colorado, that's Nevada. And I know exactly what he's alluding to, as the UFO was supposed to have been taken across Highway 40, and they blocked it off for 4 days, and then would go somehow to Searchlight, which is the birthplace of Senator Harry Reid. I don't know if he was in school back then, but the problem was going from one place to the other would be very difficult. But the real problem was Highway 40 wasn't built until 1984. So crossing the highway in 1947 or 48 or 53 with anything and calling it Highway 40 is impossible. So those kinds of things I instantly dispense with, but it is online right now as a discovery about the Kingman UFO crash. I just gave you the facts of that discovery. It is not. This touches on the same thing, the airman that was in the hangar, or the tower rather, and then the next thing you know, there is his wife supposedly is now claiming it, and claiming somebody's in a tower that the military didn't use, and it was stripped out 8 years before the UFO flew into the area. So I had to discount that, and I hope you will too. And then we can find no trace of any of the documents, and this includes the newspapers of the time after doing a search 100 miles in every direction of Kingman, and there were only 3 newspapers. It's not a big job. 1953. But the hang-up with that, to me, is it concludes by saying, remember, if a UFO crash is not in the newspaper, it never happened. And secrecy then was a little more lax than it is now, perhaps. But I'll give you an example of a little secrecy leakage that happened that was ultra secret, that has nothing to do with UFOs, but to give you one. In 1941, December 7th, we were bombed by the Japanese Imperial Navy fighters, and they did a very good job on some of the islands, including Honolulu, where I attended one university. And we wanted to be able to strike back, and the 7th Fleet, the Pacific Fleet, was really beat up. They caught everything but the aircraft carriers, basically, in harbor. And most of you know the story, the Day of Infamy. And so we put together a group of volunteers under Jimmy Doolittle. He became General Jimmy Doolittle, and they became the Doolittle Raiders. And their job, only a few knew it, but these men volunteered to load up in B-25 bombers, practice how to take off the deck of an aircraft carrier, and they flew to Japan, and they bombed Tokyo. But all of this secrecy went fine until the day they were steaming out of the harbor, and they did it in broad daylight with all the B-25s on the deck. Okay, so that's like a breach. What are you going to do? Fire them? They did it. Okay, so it's like we make mistakes now, they made mistakes then. And Arthur Stansel has been criticized because he wrote a couple of notes. Arthur Stansel is a specialist that worked at Frenchman Flat. I'm sorry, I'm giving you a tremendous amount of information, and I'm trying to keep it a little contained. He wrote a couple of notes about, he got a call from the director of the project on the 20th of May. It was a report on the 21st of May at Indian Springs Air Force Base at 4:30. 14 specialists joined him. They jumped in a Goonie bird, a C-47, flew from Indian Springs, which is a nice place, been there, and went to Phoenix, where the 25 scientists waited. And he was criticized because those notes might be a breach in security. But yet, if you read them, they're really unintelligible. They don't tell you that, they're going to go and chase a unidentified flying object, or they're going to be chasing a highly secret anything. It's just he was obeying, following the directions of the man that he worked under. And no harm done, even though it's one more nitpick area that comes from exaggerators. This I'm only showing, and very briefly, this is from Richard Hall's book, 1953 Arizona, talking about the number of aliens and their basic size, 4 foot tall, large heads, this type of thing, and where they went. And this had come from the man that you just honored yesterday, Leonard Stringfield. And Richard Hall makes reference to that in his own book. And then he talks about the May 21, 1953, Kingman, Arizona. And it was a project engineer, and that is Arthur Stansel, makes a report. And then the 1973 Wright-Patterson with 3 aliens who are brought to Wright-Patterson in dry ice. And these 2 stories became merged. And that causes a problem for anybody trying to figure out anything. When you work with history, you have to move back in time the way you think and the way you look at things. And so this is a State Highway Department road map of Arizona for 1950. What's so important about this? Well, let's see. Highway 40 is missing. What do you know? There is Highway 66, and there is what was called Old Route 93. And I don't know if you can distinguish, it's little black and white squares or rectangles, and that indicates that from Kingman, Arizona, going easterly and then south down to a place called Wickiup, it was a graded dirt road. And from there headed on to Phoenix, you see the dashed road, and it says route under construction because it was a 1-lane just barely above a wagon road. And that's relevant when you start hearing about all of these things that were happening that were physically impossible.
This is 1953 now, and Area 51 has been remodeled and made into a research facility for down discs. They have the habitat there, and they have the research laboratory at Area 51, and that's where the...
This is where I come in, so to speak. The red-lined area that is shown here is the city limits of Old Kingman, Arizona. Not all this sprawling stuff. There's an area to the north here where the arrow is that goes on to what is actually another, it's the extension of Kingman that's unincorporated that is every bit as large as modern Kingman, Arizona. Out of this road, right where the arrow is is Louise Avenue. That was the limit at one time of Kingman, and then it proceeded on out Louise Avenue and became County Highway 259, dirt first, and later they did some paving. And this is going basically eastward. Here is where Highway 40 was later constructed. It was finished on the 26th day of October, 1984, and this road going up this way follows the original 1856 Captain Beale Military Road, and that is the famous Route 66, which we have the largest length of in the United States in regard to you can get on it and go. And it's well used for various things. These were the ways out of Kingman for the most part at that point in time. It's important to remember that. This is courtesy of B.J. Booth. This is a site photo that he has, and it's kind of a fanciful, well done and very interesting version of all the things that he had heard about the Kingman UFO crash. There are some problems with the modern gunship type helicopters. They were not there. Helicopters were not used there. The Air Force flew an advance team and they were trucked out, not very glorious. The other thing is the bus shown is the wrong era, but there was a bus. And then you see the two, they're basically carbon arc lights. And then there's a UFO, and it has a gaping hole and smoke pouring out of it from that rocket that hit it. And then you have an alien standing here who is run out of something, and he's standing around waiting, and a dead alien over here in a tent. And all of that is fanciful because it's an error. But it's okay to do that because he was combining many things that are being spread about the 1953 crash. Please remember, just because it's old doesn't mean it isn't important. Roswell wouldn't be important. All of these different things that we hear about, and they haven't been solved. And we've, before us, skipped over them and just went on by to look for new conquests without resolving issues. And that's why I'm involved in this, because I lived there. I wanted to know. And so what caused me to pay any attention to this? Talking in my interview with the late Colonel Wendell Stevens, he mentioned a landmark right here. I went, holy smoke. This is very pyramid looking, a pyramid shaped of natural rock, not something man-made. There it is. That gave me something to start looking for while I was driving every secondary. There are no primary roads when you're out there in the dirt roads. Every second and tertiary road they had, trying to find this. This is the truth. I use a Jeep Wrangler as long as I can keep it together. I've broken a spring on one occasion. I broke a shock mount on a rear axle. That's hard to do that. And I broke one off, and my partner, who is here today in the audience, Dr. Joan Hangarter, was with me on the last one when I wiped out a brand new 6-ply radial aggressive tire in the front, and it was like split down the middle. And these roads are not easy to drive on. I put 400 miles on my Wrangler in first gear. That's slow. And it took not days, but weeks and hours of endless driving and eating musty sandwiches and all this. I know you'll feel sorry for me. So I had to do something. I went and I took a look at what was called a bird's eye view of a territorial map, and it was being upgraded, and it was a 1912, and it showed where the roads really were and where 93 really was. And coming out of Kingman, taking 259, you turn immediately south, and you're at what is called Sweetwater Road, for all those writing this down so you can take off to go see it. And as you go south, the county highway becomes County Highway 129. And right about here, this was how the road actually went. Rather than making a turn up above in this map, it actually turns here. It's 1/4 of a mile from the junction of 259 and Sweetwide Road. If you're writing that down, you want to go. I worked this all out for everybody else. You go 7.62 miles south down this road that says you proceed at your own risk. And the craft is sitting directly on the west side of the road, where it's at anyway. It's not there now because the Air Force decided to take it, and as soon as they could do that, and it took them 5 days to get that thing out of there because they had no equipment locally, and they ended up having some problems trying to move the craft that were not expected and no one could ever guess. Here is a genuine satellite image of old Route 93, not US 93, which is somewhere else, where it links up with the road and it comes up here 1/4 mile, and right there is Sweetwater Road going off that way toward Kingman. Pardon me. Can you see the road right here by the red line? Take a look. That's the original road out of Kingman, Arizona. Just as plain as can be. I've driven that all the way out. This photograph is taken from Highway 40. In later years, the road was paved. It is no longer used. It belongs and is on Bureau of Land Management property. And if you think I'm kidding about its Highway 259, there it is. That's proof. Oh, by the way, in the background, this is the Hualapai. This is coming out of 259, and it says, road not maintained, travel at your own risk. That's Arizona speak for good luck. Sweetwater Road, and this is looking somewhat south. Well, no, actually it's north and east this way, and the main flyway goes down this way. The main flyway for UFOs. This is where you start getting into trouble on 129, Primitive Road. And they say, caution, use at your own risk. This surface is not regularly maintained, and they aren't kidding. There's a lot of wash problems. This is the best part of the road you're looking at. And you would never think, just as I did, that this would be the place to go. I went up a lot of roads like this for miles. This road goes 29.6 miles. It goes through the Yellow Pine Ranch, private property, private road, to reach the other side into BLM land. Goes south until it reaches the Crane Ranch, makes a swing due to the east, and then comes out at modern day Highway 93. But I'm looking for what looks like this. And one day I came down this road, and there it was. And that is what Wendell Stevens described to me, because right across the road is where everything is. Right in this area is where the pyramid-shaped rock sits. Right here is where the bus stopped. 52 feet. He estimated 50 feet. It's 52 feet from there to where the saucer sat down, and there's evidence of something settled there that was large. Okay, this is not a road. This is cut back through here. This is a turnaround place for the 36-passenger bus. There was no other way to turn it around. There isn't now. It's right back through here. This is an aerial view so you can get some kind of an idea. It's being overgrown by vegetation because of an increase in the rainfall over the last 15 to 20 years. There is some type of natural or unnatural climate change happening, and you can see that the tree and manzanita brush line are creeping up the mountain. And these trees right in here are 10 to 15 years old. And during the time since 2006 to now, I've actually seen the brush growth where I've had to cut through to get to areas that I was at before because of the change. Once again, taking a look at, this is the saucer location. I call it a saucer because that's what it was described as one. And it isn't crashed, it landed. And once again, and I've just marked it, they said 50 feet, it actually turned out 52. This is a aerial drone view done by the engineer, and this is a bivouac area at the site with things. By the way, the Air Force didn't take everything with them. And there from the air you can see, here's my Wrangler down here, and this is the landing site for the flying saucer. I keep wanting to say UFO. It's identified, it's not unidentified, it's a saucer. And here it is up close. This tree is right at 15 years of age, and it's amazing how much this has changed. I've been there every year for the last few years now, multiple times. And once again, you can see the tree growth. I'm at the site where it sat. Radiation levels, I'm taking them right there. Microsieverts are 5 times normal background radiation at that location, and if you walk away 50 feet, they drop back to normal. Go back to where it is, it goes up. I haven't any idea why. If the craft is not damaged, I don't know what would cause that to happen, or if there's some kind of natural deposit in that very place right here. I can't answer that question for you, but I can tell you what I found. This, I'm talking about the 18th, I pretty much covered that. Beyond the radar operators, you had the people doing the work. The saucer didn't crash, and the Air Force didn't even know why it went down, just where it went down, because it was on the radar that shot it down. This I did just as this is like not very long ago to show you the soil really as dry as it's ever going to get, and there's some moisture down here. And I did this with a flat shovel and just straight down. This particular disc is not a flying saucer. It's something I had. It's actually, it has an electronic use at home. It weighs 16 pounds, and I dropped it from an elevation just like this, and you can see the sink rate. And the porosity of the soil, it is sand. Sand cannot hold water. It goes through. There is some sedimentary soils involved here, but not enough to prevent water from seeping down and sitting there, and so you end up with about 6 inches of hard pack you can stand on and drive on, but if you weigh as much as a flying saucer and you set down on it, the water gets displaced underground and it sinks. If you park like my Jeep there, and just for a little while, pretty soon the tires are lower. It's starting already, and so this is how to nip in the bud this what happened with the 20-inch depth thing. And it was also at a tilt, shifting more weight to that particular point. This is the engineer. This is the field kitchen area. And they had some of these Dutch ovens. There's actually quite a few. Most of them are grown over. This is not. We found a lot of different relics that the Air Force, they didn't do a regular cleanup when they left. They just left things that were just out in the woods or out in the desert. And that's me in my best suit. And I'm pointing over to the field kitchen and some other things that I've just we found. And I'm holding a tape measure for a reason, because I'm measuring a field where the KP people got rid of things that they don't take with them, and they didn't bag them. They dug. I'm former U.S. Army, and you dig shallow trenches. I think the Air Force probably digs them even shallower. Any Air Force people out there, but they throw the stuff in it, and they just take a spade and they just cover it over, maybe tramp on it, and they leave. Doesn't sound very exciting, but it's a clue. Whoops. That's not an electric opener can lid. Whoops. Here's something rather important. That's half a can. What does this mean? This means something very unusual. Being a historian, I had to know over just history, anthropology, and archaeology. I needed to know about a few other things besides how to get the museum doors open on multiple complexes. And old rusty cans do have meaning. This can I'm showing you up close, and it has an interesting bead right here. And that little bead is lead. And that dates the can. And it was a departure from what normal cans are. It was the elimination of an attempt to eliminate using lead solder for all the joints in a tin can so that children especially wouldn't suffer brain damage from lead poisoning. And this particular can, however, its primary contractor was the military, because it was for condensed sterile milk, and it could be taken into the field, and as long as it wasn't opened, it would last as long as, well, who knows, if you kept it cool and out of sunlight and some things, maybe a fifth the time of a MRE, perhaps. And certainly not as tasty, but it was used in everything, mixed with powdered eggs, mixed with hotcakes, and all of these different things. And so does that sound important? It is, because it was made from 1951 to 52, and those cans are so popular, and there's the solder in the middle. That's where they injected the product, and then they dripped lead solder over the hole. This can is one of the few that I found of hundreds of these, where the cans were punctured on that side, that end, and this is considered the top of the can, so the lead stayed away from the product. The double seam is visible here with this dented can, right there. Here's your seam, and this is a double layer, and the can got dented over a period of time from whatever causing it, but it allowed you to see that. These are the same cans sold at auction. I said they're rare. They are. So I'm showing this and say, think about it. You can find these in antique stores, auction houses, eBay, because of the short run that were used to supplement the military. And actually, this type of thing with lead was used all the way back in the Civil War. But this was a step for a 2-year period where the military tried and the company tried to give them some type of can that wasn't full of lead, so when the soldier put it in water to make a glass of milk, he wasn't drinking a lot of lead. May 22nd, 1953, in the morning hours, before sunup on the 22nd of May, the Kingman UFO passed within 1 mile of the Red Lake crash site on Stockton Hill Road, going to Pierce Ferry Road, across the desert road that put it within a short range from Hoover Dam without ever getting on the roads, the main roads. It did it in the dark, and they got it up to the dam on the right-hand side of the dam, meaning east, and they had engineers there, were already there with a barge, and they loaded the thing on the barge, and they were going to just pull it across the Colorado River above the dam, and they lost the cables, and the thing broke loose, went down, slammed into the dam, and they had some problems with that, and they got a hold of it again and got it back to the other side. The reason they were headed straight for Groom Lake. The rumors that this was put on a trailer and hauled from here to Wright-Patterson is not true. The rumor that it was taken straight to Los Alamos is not true. The rumor that it went to Sandia Laboratory over in New Mexico is not true. That's where it went. Where it went after that, if you have ever heard of Area 51 and the Area 51 story, and they talk about a UFO was there, it was reverse engineered so we could learn things. a prototype. Trainer was set up to teach airmen and all of these other things that are said. There are people who believe that, who do not believe the Kingman craft ever happened. But the story about Area 51 in the beginning and about this UFO is the Kingman craft. So those two go together. If it's to be consistent, if you believe in the 51 story, you have to start thinking about what happened. The mix-up. This is taken from the old County Highway 259 looking due north out into Wallapai Valley, and off through here is Red Lake. It's dry almost always, except during monsoon, which is right now, and it can hold water.
Range is the Cerbets, okay, and that's outside of Kingman, north of Kingman. It runs parallel with the river here. There was, or there is, an air base that was, it used to be a U.S. Army air base back in the 40s and during the war. There was a disc that landed about 13 to 15 miles from that particular base alongside the Cerbets.
All right. This is to give you an idea. There's a lot of terrain there, and I'm sorry, for historians, we're kind of finicky. This is the Cerbat Mountains that Bill Uhouse just mentioned. This is Red Lake in this area. This whole area, if I can get it with the mouse pointer, is the flight path basically going from the northwest to the southeast. And that is a flight path that has been used and reported UFO sightings for years. And this is the west to east flight area going here. The problem was the radar was set up over here, and up into this area. And how or why this one had a problem, it did. It came down, and this is where the Red Lake UFO crashed, and it really crashed.
There was a guy named Al Abel, because he called me up. He gave me the name of the location, and it was Phu Tank. And I'm going, now this Phu Tank is a dirt water tank for cattle. In Arizona or in the Southwest, you would have like a reservoir for cattle to come in and water. And so Phu Tank. So I started looking around on topographical maps and whatnot. And finally, I found Phu Tank on a topographical map. It took me a while. Now, to go back to the person that said it was at Phu Tank, and that's where I'm kind of at with the research, because once I found Phu Tank, and Phu Tank is no longer used because it's out on the Neal Ranch, and that's Leland Neal and Gracie's ranch, and that covers pretty much the Wallapai Valley. It would be out by Red Lake, and Red Lake is a dried up lake bed, but whenever you can see it at a certain time, it's red. And even when you go out on the lake itself, the lake bed itself, the soil is red. So that's why it's called Red Lake. And at times when it's a good rainy season, that lake is filled with water. Red Lake is it's a desert phenomenon in a way, because when you're driving out on Stockton Hill Road, because I've been out to Red Lake and seen it personally when there's water out there. I've been over the lake bed a couple of times, because I went out looking around. I was trying to find Phu Tank. Once I found it on the map, I started looking around how to get there.
Here's Phu Tank, looking from the topographical maps that are available. Phu, not to be confused with Foo Fighter. It's an Arizona term. And it, as he was mentioning, there's an earthen dam, and water from runoff or monsoons fill that up. This particular area was good for 200 head of cattle, and the butte that I'm going to be discussing is right here. I've climbed that 3 times, that's it. I won't ever do it again. It's too tough. And there were a couple of witnesses right over in here on what would be the dry ground area, and then the old rancher across the valley at about 10 miles, and he saw the craft come down, and he thought it went right smack into Futang. And the aviation historian and museum curator looked a lot and tried to find it without any success. Here's what it looks like in reality. There you can see the butte on the right here. And if you had a really sharp eye, and I'm hoping this will show, yes, right here, right through here. If you can see it, there is a scar. And if you look right here, that's an impact crater. The craft did not fall into Futang. It hit the top of this, and based on numbers that we've worked up, this is looking out from where the dam was, which has been breached. And this is the earthen dam right here. And this is an overfly. It's quick. I'll let you see this. To give you an idea, this is coming away from the butte, and it's going to fly in a roundabout way to where the impact crater is. There's a very short skid mark. This is up above the main part of the water, so it was protected from erosion. This is the butte, and it's quite actually for desert country. It's attractive. But this is the flight zone. It goes right up through here, right across the flat. And what happened is the UFO didn't miss the top of the butte, it clipped it. And you can see here where it hit on the right-hand side, and then flew, well, sort of flew until it hit right there. The dam's location is there. And what I was going to do is show you, at least from the Ricochet type of thing. This is courtesy of Ted Lohman, who is a producer and director, award-winning filmmaker. And it's just to indicate what a ricochet can happen. And this is basically what it did. And it went up and did a short apogee and then continued on and then crashed into the ground. There were 4 crew on that craft. 2 were severely injured. They were taken to Nellis Air Force Base. The other 2 crew members were taken to Groom Lake. And I don't know if I'll put you through this. This is me standing on the mountain, and I'm talking too much, and you've already done some of that with me. This is some of the remains of the crash site area. What has happened here, the drain field didn't affect it very much, and there's evidence, clear evidence of prior excavation and bottom rock that was pulled up as they dug it out. The late Colonel Wendell Stevens said they swept the area twice. That would mean for pieces and parts because it basically gutted the lower part of the craft out, hitting the rock. What the other film would show you is I'm standing right at the place it happened, and it bulldozed rock to a degree and then blew rock away at a diameter bigger than the craft, which is absolutely normal for something like that, making a ricochet shot. All of this was calculated by the engineer, you recall, who was on hand to make and help James Cameron's dive a success. And the craft, after hitting the top of the butte, went 0.21 miles before it augured into the ground. And there was a shallow where it started to skid and then stuck, went right in, smashed. The implications, and this is what I leave you with, are that if these things that I have found do in fact prove, and they do, that there has been a lot of distortion, myth and legend about the story of the old 1953 Kingman UFO crash. And the fact that I've found other things that I don't present to you today because there's just simply a lack of time. And they will be on a DVD that I release in the first part, and then probably something full-length that will be produced by someone besides me, because it is so extensive, the evidence. And I haven't found tinfoil or any war surplus things out there, but I can tell you I have had problems. I was out at the main site on the Wallapai, and the first time was 6.5 hours. I do this by myself. I've been doing exploration of historic sites for a long time. My first books on history came out 40 years ago, and I've got 12 to go that are all ready to hit the market next year. Now, everything was peaceful. Not a single car came by, because nobody drives this road. And I got buzzed by an F-15 about 200 feet off the deck. I'm not exaggerating. I was breaking down my camera. My engineer said, you know, he saw where we were. I mean, he could see it. And he dropped right down, and when we knew he was there, he was just beyond us. We didn't hear him coming. And then he nosed it up and went to afterburners, and there's no way human that I'm aware of where you could identify them. And speaking of human, let me explain to you about the aliens. I forgot to mention that. The 4 crew members at the Wallapai site waiting with their saucer disabled, tilted at an angle because they couldn't fly it like it did after the radar. When they were approached by the recovery crew, the first thing that stood out to the airmen was, as explained to me with great emotion, they were human, humanoid. That was not something they expected, and there was a big surprise. And they were promptly removed to Groom Lake. And that's directly from a person who was there. The other thing was that I had problems with the loss of domain sites, one of which I'm using now. And I had hacking going on. I was again out at the site, and I was approached. I was with the engineer, and we had the drone there. And we were approached by this vehicle. And I called out to my engineer and said, thank you, to get down, there's a vehicle coming. And this is verifiable, at least from the engineer. And an OD large power wagon, like a Expedition or a big Dodge, comes up to me, and there are 2 men sitting in the front seat, and the driver is alongside of me, and they're wearing battle dress uniforms, and they're holding military rifles. Whether they're full automatic or not, I wasn't watching. I did not go there unarmed because there are javelina. They aren't wild pigs, but they resemble them, and they're dangerous, and mountain lions in the area I'm at, and then also the infamous Mojave Green, which is a rattlesnake that has venom like a rattlesnake and the neurotoxin like a cobra. So you don't want to be bitten by one. And so we were both armed for our own protection, but lightly armed, not anything to take on these guys. And he said to me, what's going on? What are you doing here? And I'm on BLM land, public land. And my reaction to that was that I was a simpleton. And I said, oh, are you 2 out here hunting? And I think that seemed to cool him off. They're like maybe I was just a simpleton and I was just out bird watching or something. But it was a lesson for me because I was confronted by what was obviously military, and I have no idea why. Where was I? Within 100 feet of where the UFO, the saucer, had landed. Never saw them again. They drove away in the direction. It's a one-lane road, 29.6 miles to the highway. Never saw them again. I don't know where they went. So those kinds of things happened. Different types of threats that have happened. I've noticed in some of the blogs already beating me up before I get here, and that happens, and it's okay. But and some commending and worrying about me, and I thank those people because of so many people that have come and tried to talk to you and other groups involved in UFOs who died before they arrived. And I'm here, and believe me, I'm alive, and I'm not done because the reason they were there, the reason why were the UFOs flying there, why are they there now? Still there now. There is an underground base, and that is X number of miles from Old Town Kingman, and that's where I head next. And I'll climb whatever mountains are necessary. I would welcome questions from anyone. If you'll bear with me, I would like to call Dr. Joan here. I'm hearing impaired because of my military service, and I don't want to answer a question you didn't ask me. You want, here. Thank you. Can we have house lights a little bit, please?
Tell them to line up.
And, huh?
You want them to line up if they have questions.
What?
Have them line up over there.
Yes. Anyone who would like to ask a question, please come up to the microphone. If you have no questions and I've settled everything you need to know, then that's fine. All right? Yeah.
I don't really have a question, but if time allows and others are interested, the part of your presentation that you skipped over with the crash bounce and the trough, seeing as how what you're saying is potentially so very important, I would like to see that if that would be okay.
You mean you want to see that again?
No, he skipped over a section where the craft bounced, where he was standing on top of the mountain, and he was going to show the trail where the impact was.
Well, that's in the DVD.
Oh, okay. I thought it was in here.
What is? What is?
The section that you skipped over where you're on top of the butte and that
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Play that?
Yeah, but that will, if you want to, if the audience wants that, I'll play it. You know, it's, I don't think it's necessary. Take a look at my DVD and you'll find out. And there's a lot more. Yes, sir.
When you finally go public with this, how soon do you expect the government to step in and debunk all this?
How soon do you expect the government to shut it down now that you've gone public?
I think the main site where the saucer landed could easily become an archaeological site and be fenced. And I'll tell you something, I've had some angry people at me because I won't tell them where to go just to get to it, because they want to go with a shovel and dig it up. And to me, when you think of Area 51, it's about Roswell. When you look at Roswell, about a 1 square mile of debris, it looks like it was carpet bombed by a B-52 after 65 years of potholing. And so I think there's a possibility that they would use that as a method. It would be reasonable to say, because they've declared it an archaeological area, that they fence the area off. That's done frequently, but it might be done because there's other things that I have yet to find that they don't want me to find. And I can't explain why I was confronted by people in BDUs and carrying, I mean, they were military, period. And because there is no military presence there in Kingman, where'd they come from, you know? And so one side of it is there won't be one twig on top of another once everybody knows how to find it. Okay, is that good or is that bad? I can't answer that for you. The other question is, shouldn't it be public knowledge? We all have tried so hard to be able to establish some kind of tangible thing. That pyramid natural rock is bigger than it looks because the brush has grown up and it's like right next to the road, and it means nothing to anybody unless you've been told by someone who has since passed away, and he made reference. This is where the bus turned. But it gave me something to look for. I'm telling you, I saw a lot of rock and a lot of brush and a lot of desert, and I walked it and I drove it, and I never saw anything that really locked on good with the exception of Red Lake. And I began to think that that really was it, and they were mentioning the Hualapai crash or the Hualapai area as an error. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Harry, I was wondering if I understood you correctly when you said or implied that you were not able to find a piece of the actual saucer. Is that correct?
You were not able to find a piece of the actual saucer, is that correct?
No, that saucer was intact. And we are looking for things from the Red Lake crash because it was so, the aviation historian and museum curator from the Kingman Army Air Base thinks it was all washed away in Putang, but he never saw what I saw later when we did 10 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet, and 300 foot, 6-camera drone flights. I have 6 cameras at one time, so I could get a side view and different views to try to find if there was something else that had happened there. Because when I walked away from there, we got 2 people that were positive that it was there. We've got 15 people total that saw this thing go down. And so here I am trying to figure it out. And so not all of it could have washed away because it overshot Putang. So the water couldn't have washed it all. And when they did a double sweep, they missed something, I'm positive. And so I'll look there.
Were you able to interrogate the impact site on the butte?
Could you repeat that?
Were you able to inspect the impact site on the butte, the first contact
Were you
of
able
the
to
saucer?
inspect the impact site
Of the which one?
of the butte? The
First impact.
Yes, that's the one that I had radiation readings from, which confused me because I thought that would be the thing that I would find where it was all torn up, and if there was something inside related to what makes everything run that had radiation as a byproduct, I would find it there. But I found it at the one that wasn't damaged. Yes, sir.
You made a point about the different dates being incorrect on the first crash, and then you came up with the 18th. I'm not clear how you picked the 18th.
He wants to know how you came up with the May 18th.
Colonel Stevens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I tell them a little secret?
Tell them a secret.
All right.
Yes.
Do you have time for one more? Huh? Really? In the back room, do we have time for one quick one? I'm gonna jump through here. This is on the DVD. 5 minutes. Got it. I'll do it. Saturday, early afternoon, May 24th, 1953. Kingman residents witness a flying disc crash into the north face of the Hualapai Mountain, instantly starting a forest fire. What happens turns out to be very odd. 2 strange-looking men are apprehended at the location of the impact, and it's Forest Service and other people up on the mountain trying to fight a fire, and this is timber, okay? Basically, I'll run this if I can get it all done inside of the 5 minutes. This is on there's more than this on the DVD. This is about what happened. Bang, okay? This is the Mojave County Courthouse. It's cast in place concrete reinforced steel. It figures into this because the sheriff got moved, Sheriff Porter, trying to find a jail, got moved there. This is Sheriff Porter and his deputies. Remember them earlier? The jail was located at one end of the basement below grade. There are no windows. There are 2 entry doors they set up, or security doors. They have 2 to 4 deputies on duty, and there are 2, what they called at the time, detention rooms. The head of security for the Mojave County Court, I talked to and I said, you know, my research has revealed the following things. 2 strange men were apprehended up on the mountain. They're described in the newspaper as 2 strange men, right where this disc crashed. And they were taken down into the basement, and they were put into a room someplace where there were 2 side by side, okay, I'm on it, and locked in. The sheriff was out when a Forest Service man brought him in, sat him on a wood bench. He sat on a wood bench, and the deputy locked the 2 strange-looking men inside, and they went to get Sheriff Porter down with Opie at the pond fishing. 1953, Kingman, slow. The sheriff comes, to make this really quick, and the deputy and the Forest Service worker brief the sheriff. And he tells them to open the door. And they open the door, and the 2 strange men are not there. That is documented fact. Documented fact, and it's featured in the newspaper, and the sheriff never lifted a finger to do anything to look for them or seal the building and all of those things. And I tell you that because it also happened in 1950 with 5 of them. And they and a complete ambulance disappeared. So there are more. And remember that I looked at newspapers for 100 miles around and never saw a thing. Missed 14 UFOs. So I thank you very much for your attention. Here is the bench still there. Oh, for anyone that's interested in, I did not bring any DVDs. I was to be here kind of incommunicado. I have pre-order forms. If you want to order some, I have them and they're ready to ship. I go to the Bay Area UFO Con next in San Francisco, Bay Area. I'll be there mid-month if anyone is in that direction. Please join me. Be glad to meet you. And I thank you for your time. Good day.